The chamber was older than memory. Not history, memory. It had been built before anyone thought to record why such rooms were needed, before power learned it could justify itself with words instead of architecture. The walls rose in smooth, uninterrupted curves, their surfaces marked not by ornament but by restraint. Sound behaved differently here. Voices did not echo. They settled, as if the space itself decided what deserved to linger. The alien girl stood among the observers, still enough to disappear into her role. She was not meant to be noticed. She was meant to watch. That had always been enough. Until now. The human stood at the center of the chamber. Not placed there by guards. Not escorted. Not framed by ceremony. He simply stood. At first she assumed it was a mistake. A miscalculation in procedure, a brief lapse in protocol that would be corrected the moment someone higher noticed. Humans did not belong here. Not alone. Not upright. Not without visible tension written into every line of their bodies. She waited for the correction. It did not come. The pressure field activated without warning. It was subtle, designed that way. Not a weapon, not a threat. A test. The kind used to measure stability rather than break it. The alien girl felt it immediately, a familiar tightening in her chest as the invisible force spread across the chamber, probing, adjusting, searching for resistance. She had seen beings fold under it. She had seen others mask their strain behind practiced stillness. The human did neither. He inhaled slowly, then exhaled. That was all. Her eyes narrowed despite herself. The field intensified by a fraction, recalibrating, as if confused by the absence of response. The human's posture shifted slightly, one foot adjusting, weight redistributing, not in preparation for collapse but for balance. Around. Not against. The girl's fingers twitched at her side before she stilled them. Her training urged neutrality, but something deeper had already begun to react. This should not be possible. Humans survived through cooperation, through numbers, through adaptability. They were resilient, yes, but not like this. Not in isolation. Not in the gravitational center of a room built to remind even powerful beings of their limits. And yet the human remained. Not rigid, not defiant, present. A murmur moved through the upper tiers, quiet, controlled, concerned. The girl did not look away from the human. She feared that if she did, the moment would fracture into something easier to explain. The pressure shifted again. She felt it then, something she had only encountered in simulations and distant astronomical data. The sensation of a system adjusting its parameters in real time, not to overpower an anomaly but to incorporate it. Her breath caught. The chamber was adapting. Not to his strength, to his existence asterisk. The human's gaze moved slowly across the space, attentive without being confrontational. He did not seek approval. He did not scan for danger. He listened, as though the room itself were speaking and he was willing to hear it. Listening, she realized, that was the difference. Most beings anticipated power. They moved ahead of it, tried to predict it, bent themselves around its expected shape. The human did not anticipate, he received. The pressure eased, not failed. Eased, protocols resumed their low, regulated hum. Conversations that had stalled restarted, but not at the same speed. Decisions unfolded more carefully, each step measured twice before being taken once. The alien girl blinked. When her vision cleared, nothing had corrected itself. The impossible remained. She felt something warm spread through her chest, not excitement, not fear. Recognition. The kind that arrived when an old assumption quietly died and left space behind it. Someone near her whispered a warning. She ignored it. The human shifted again, settling into stillness as though this were not the most dangerous place he could stand, but simply the place he was needed. His face showed focus, yes, but also openness. No performance, no armor, just awareness. She realized then that he had not challenged the system. He had interrupted its certainty. That was far worse. Her gaze flicked briefly toward the far end of the chamber, where authority manifested not through movement but through perfect stillness. Those figures were watching now, not him alone, but the ripple he had created. Their attention was sharp, calculating, evaluative. The human spoke. His voice was steady, unadorned, carrying no ambition beyond being understood. "I'm listening," he said, nothing more. The words landed heavier than any declaration of power ever could. The chamber paused. Then slowly it continued, changed. The pressure did not return. The rhythm did not recover its former pace. Something essential had shifted, and everyone present knew it, even if no one yet knew how to name it. The alien girl straightened without realizing it, her posture mirroring his in the smallest way. Her role had been observation. It was becoming something else. She watched the human turn his attention toward another speaker, calm, attentive, impossibly out of place, and perfectly fitted to the moment. For the first time, she did not wonder what he could do. She wondered what would happen if the galaxy learned to make room for humans like him. The question settled deep within her, heavy and unavoidable. And she knew, with quiet certainty, that nothing in this chamber would ever return to exactly what it had been before he stood there. Not even her. The alien girl did not move after that. She stayed anchored in the exact posture her instructors had drilled into her, chin level, shoulders relaxed, hands still. Yet inside her, everything had shifted. The chamber had accepted a variable it was never designed to accept, and now it was pretending nothing unusual had happened. Pretending, she realized, was what systems did when they needed time. Across the upper tiers, observers resumed their composure with the precision of people who had practiced calm their entire lives. A few glanced at one another, quick and controlled. The kind of glance that said, "Did you feel that too?" Without risking the vulnerability of speaking it aloud. The human remained centered, not claiming anything, not apologizing for it. He listened again, and the chamber, ridiculous as the thought was, seemed to respond. Not in sentiment, in mechanics. The pressure field stayed lowered, as if the system had decided further testing would yield no useful data. It had learned what it needed. The human would not collapse quickly. He would not react predictably. He was stable. The alien girl's stomach tightened, not from fear but from the strange vertigo of witnessing a rule fail. In her world, rules did not fail. They bent, they adapted, they reinforced themselves. But they did not simply stop working. A senior voice rose from the inner ring, cutting cleanly through the murmurs. The words were formal, shaped for public record. The kind of statement that usually flowed forward without resistance, pulling decisions with it like a tide. The human waited until the voice finished. Then gently he tilted his head. "I want to be sure I understand," he said. A pause, not because the chamber did not hear him, because it did. The alien girl felt the pause ripple outward, an invisible wave of recalculation. The speaker had expected deference or silence. What they received was a request for clarity, stated with no aggression, no challenge. Just refusal to pretend comprehension. She almost laughed, the impulse rising sharp and sudden, but she smothered it instantly. Humor in this chamber was dangerous. It loosened things. It revealed too much. Still, the human's tone had something that resembled humor without actually being it. A kind of grounded earnestness that made the demand for clarity feel less like a weapon, and more like a hand held up at the right time. The speaker responded slower now. Words became explanations, assumptions became premises. The chamber's pace shifted again. The alien girl watched the change with widening awareness. This was not a confrontation. It was worse. It was an alteration to the *** process * itself. She realized then that the human had offered the chamber a mirror, not a flattering one, a mirror that showed where certainty had become lazy. Her eyes flicked toward the far end again, to the still figures who governed the space. Their stillness had not changed, but their attention had sharpened, focused not on the human as a threat but as a tool. A dangerous tool. Tools were kept, controlled, stored, sometimes dismantled. The human, unaware of any of this, nodded slightly as the speaker finished clarifying. He did not thank them. He did not praise them for explaining. He accepted the clarity as normal, an expectation, not a gift. That, the girl thought, was the most alien thing about him. He expected decency to be standard. A low hum deepened beneath the floor, as if the chamber itself had acknowledged a new baseline. The alien girl felt it in her bones. The palace systems were not sentimental, but they were responsive. They tracked patterns, measured outcomes. They would remember this, so would everyone else. The proceedings continued. Another voice spoke, and another. A proposal was introduced, something about corridor access, shipping lanes, a resource dispute at the edge of a neutral sector. The girl barely processed the details. She processed the rhythm, the way each statement now landed differently. Statements became careful. Questions appeared where none used to. Clarifications followed claims. Not because the court had suddenly become kinder, because the human's presence made care the safer option. She watched as an advisor attempted to return the chamber to its old speed. They spoke quickly, confidently, as if the earlier pause had been an anomaly. Their tone suggested inevitability, and the chamber almost followed, almost. Then the human shifted his stance. A small movement, just weight redistributing, and the advisor faltered, only for a fraction of a second, but the girl saw it. The advisor glanced toward him, then away, then continued with a noticeably slower pace. The alien girl's pulse kicked again. It wasn't magic. It was something more chilling. It was social gravity. The human had become a reference point, not for authority but for accountability. People were adjusting their behavior because they knew someone was watching who did not respond to performance. Performance had always been the safest currency in rooms like this. You performed loyalty, performed competence, performed certainty. Even lies could be tolerated if they were presented with the right composure. This human did not buy performance. He bought clarity. The alien girl realized she was holding her breath. She released it slowly, careful not to make sound. Her gaze remained locked on him as the chamber's energy shifted from sharp to measured. This, she thought, is how empires survive longer than they deserve, by learning, once in a rare while, to slow themselves. Another decision resolved, quietly, cleanly. The human did not smile, did not react. He simply remained attentive, a steady presence beside no one, aligned with nothing, yet influencing everything. The girl's shock had faded into something else now, a kind of reverent unease. Because she could see the future in the shape of this moment, a court forced to explain itself, a power structure forced to tolerate friction, a galaxy forced to consider that humans, at least some humans, could stand in rooms like this and not be undone. And if that was true, then what else had her people been wrong about? A soft stir behind her made her glance sideways. Another observer, older, eyes sharper, had shifted, studying her with a brief, probing look. The girl stilled instantly, smoothing her expression into neutrality. But the older observer had already seen enough. The girl understood the unspoken message. Don't become attached to anomalies. The system will decide what to do with them. Her gaze returned to the human. He did not look like an anomaly. He looked like a person. That, she realized, was the most dangerous part. If he had been monstrous, it would have been easy to fear him. If he had been obviously exceptional, it would have been easy to worship him. He was neither. He was simply, stubbornly normal. Normal enough to make the chamber question itself. A new voice rose, deeper, more authoritative. The girl felt the shift before she identified it. This voice came from closer to the still center of the far end, a figure whose words carried consequences even when spoken gently. The chamber quieted, not forced, obedient. The human turned, attentive. The alien girl felt a prickle along her arms. Something was about to be formalized. The authoritative figure spoke, procedural, precise. The words were measured to fit into record, to become part of the chamber's memory. The statement acknowledged the human's presence indirectly, framing it as a detail rather than a disruption. The human listened. Then at the end he asked a single question, not confrontational, not challenging, a clarifying question. The authoritative figure paused. The pause was longer than any the girl had witnessed in this chamber before. And then impossibly the figure answered, fully, without irritation. The alien girl's heart thudded once hard. That had never happened, not like that, not with someone like him. The chamber, she realized, had reached a line where it could have rejected the human's influence with a single dismissive gesture. It had not. It had absorbed it, and absorption meant permanence. She felt the weight of that settle through her body as if gravity had increased by a fraction. If the chamber had accepted him today, it would be difficult, costly, to remove him tomorrow without acknowledging that removal publicly. Systems hated public acknowledgement of weakness. They preferred quiet corrections. The girl's mind raced ahead, mapping possible outcomes the way she'd been trained. If the human was kept, he would become a symbol. If he became a symbol, factions would form around him. If factions formed, pressure would rise. If pressure rose, someone would attempt to either control him or eliminate him. She looked at him again, really looked. He did not seem like someone easily controlled. Not because he was strong, because he did not hunger. He did not hunger for approval, for status, for belonging. He stood as if standing were enough. That kind of person was rare and therefore dangerous. Across the chamber, the proceedings approached their final phase. The air took on the subtle quality of conclusion, voices shortening, statements becoming summaries, attention narrowing toward the inevitable closing gestures. The human remained steady. The alien girl found herself searching for any sign of strain now, a tightening in his jaw, a subtle tremor, a flicker of fear. There was none, only attentiveness. And something else beneath it, an unwillingness to lie to himself. The chamber closed, not with drama, with quiet finality. Observers began to move, controlled and orderly, their murmurs returning as soon as the formal tension released. The human remained a moment longer, as if waiting to be dismissed, but no one issued the dismissal. Instead, paths formed around him naturally, attendants adjusting routes to avoid collision without making him feel singled out. The alien girl watched this too. The corridor outside the chamber felt narrower than it had any right to be, not physically, politically. The human walked at a steady pace, guided by an attendant who never once touched him, never once hurried him. That restraint was deliberate. If he was treated like a prisoner, he would become a prisoner in the story the palace told itself. If he was treated like an honored guest, he would become one just as quickly. So they treated him like a variable, permitted movement, controlled proximity, no visible force. The alien girl followed at a distance that made her presence plausible, an observer doing her duty, nothing more. Her footsteps were silent, her breathing measured. She had practiced invisibility until it became instinct, but today invisibility felt insufficient, because she did not want to disappear from this moment. She wanted to understand it. Ahead, the human paused briefly at an intersection where corridors branched. One path leading toward more ceremonial quarters, another toward maintenance routes, another toward a private ring reserved for those whose presence required discretion. The attendant gestured toward the private ring. The human did not resist. He did not ask why. He simply nodded once and continued. That annoyed her. Not because he was doing something wrong, but because he was making it look easy. Humans were supposed to argue, to posture, to bargain. His calm suggested he had already accepted that the palace would do what it would do, and his only power lay in how he responded. That kind of response control was rare in any species. The alien girl's attention flicked to the overhead sensors. She could feel them, faintly, tiny shifts in air density, soft pulses in the corridor's hum. The palace was tracking everything. Not only the human's movement, but her own. Even now, her observer role was likely being measured against new patterns. She kept her distance anyway. At the entrance to the private ring, the attendant stopped and spoke quietly to the human. The girl could not hear the words, but she saw the human's expression change, only slightly. A tightening around the eyes, a micro-pause before he nodded again. Information had been given. Important information. The human stepped through the doors and vanished from view. The attendant turned and walked away without looking back. The alien girl remained in the corridor, alone with the hum of the palace and the weight of what she had just witnessed. She waited until she was certain the attendant had gone far enough not to return abruptly. Then she moved. Not quickly. Quickness drew attention. She approached the private ring doors and stopped just short of crossing the threshold. She could not enter without permission. The palace would allow her to step forward, of course. Her credentials were real. But the act itself would be recorded as choice, not accident. She hesitated. Then she stepped back. Not because she was afraid, because she was thinking. Humans, she reminded herself, were dangerous not when they fought, but when they forced systems to explain themselves. If she wanted to understand him, she could not rush toward him like a fascinated child. She had to approach the way her world approached everything meaningful, indirectly. She turned and moved along a side passage that led deeper into the palace's internal roots, areas that were not seen in ceremony, where influence moved quietly through infrastructure. The corridor widened, the hum changing pitch as she entered a zone closer to the palace's data and relay spines. Here, the walls bore subtle access markings, not decorative but functional, life support conduits, shield routing, communication veins, the palace's skeleton. She stopped at a recess panel and placed her hand against it. The surface warmed slightly, recognizing her. A thin seam opened and revealed a narrow console. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, calling up a restricted set of observation logs. No names, no titles, just event summaries and sensor notes. She searched for the time stamp corresponding to the chamber test. The log appeared. It was unusual. The pressure field had initiated at standard parameters as expected. The human's vital readings were present, heart rate elevated, then stabilizing rapidly. Respiratory rate slow, controlled. Muscle tension minimal. That alone was extraordinary. Then she saw it, a line of system annotation she had never seen attached to a biological entity. Adaptive calibration. Field response modified, stability threshold reassessed. The palace had changed its own behavior in response to him. Her throat went dry. She scrolled further. There was no threat detected warning. No security escalation. No sedation protocol. Instead, there was a note that made her stare for a long moment. Observation. Subject maintained NON reactive awareness. Recommendation. Do not apply repeated stressors. Diminishing returns. As if the palace had decided the human would not break in useful ways. The alien girl's fingers hovered over the console. Part of her wanted to dig deeper, to access restricted identity profiles, to learn who he was, where he came from, what weaknesses could be predicted. But she did not. She closed the console instead, letting the panel seal smoothly. If she approached him as a collection of vulnerabilities, she would become like everyone else in this palace. She would become another predictable force pressing against him, another stressor the system would eventually learn to reduce. No. She needed a different method. She began walking again, this time toward a smaller observation gallery that overlooked the private ring from above. The route was not secret, but it was rarely used. Only those who watched rather than participated bothered with it. She arrived and stepped into the dim gallery, where the light was softened to prevent reflections on the glass. Below, the private ring corridor stretched quiet and clean, lined with doors that concealed quarters designed for discretion. The human's door was easy to find. Not by label, there were none, but by the subtle attention patterns around it. Two security nodes hovered at a distance, pretending to be part of the architecture. The palace was not guarding him like a prisoner. It was watching him like a phenomenon. The alien girl leaned closer to the glass, careful not to touch it. Her breath fogged the surface faintly before the climate control cleared it. Inside the quarters, visible through a narrow interior window, the human sat alone, not pacing, not fidgeting, sitting. He stared at a viewport where stars drifted in slow silence. His posture suggested thought, not panic. He looked like someone who had been handed a question too large to answer quickly, and had decided not to lie to himself with a rushed response. The alien girl felt her shock return, but this time it was mixed with something sharper. Respect. That respect scared her, because respect created attachment, and attachment created risk. And risk in palaces like this did not remain personal for long. It became political. Below, the human moved at last, shifting forward slightly. He rubbed his hands together once, a small human gesture that made him suddenly seem less like a constant and more like what he truly was, someone trying to hold himself together. He exhaled. Then he spoke softly to no one, not words she could hear through the glass, but she saw the shape of them, and she realized with a quiet jolt that the human was not only processing the chamber, he was preparing. Preparing for. The door did not open immediately. That in itself was a statement. The human remained seated, his gaze fixed on the slow drift of stars beyond the viewport. He had learned in the last few hours that silence in this place was rarely empty. It was deliberate, measured, a way of testing what filled the gaps when nothing was demanded. He let the silence exist. Behind the walls, systems tracked his stillness, recalculated probability curves, flagged minor deviations that refused to settle into familiar models. He did not know this. He only felt the weight of waiting and the quiet discipline required not to rush it away. The door opened without sound. He turned, not sharply, not late, meeting the moment exactly as it arrived. The alien woman stood in the doorway, not armored, not ceremonial. She wore simple attire, structured but unadorned, its lines emphasizing function over display. Her skin was pale beneath the chamber's light, her hair bound loosely at the nape of her neck. And her ears, long, elegant, unmistakably non-human, tilted slightly backward, an unconscious signal of caution she did not bother to hide. She did not step inside. Neither did she speak. The human rose slowly, careful not to mirror aggression where none existed. He stood at a respectful distance, hands visible, posture open, not submissive, not challenging, present. Her gaze moved over him with unsettling precision. Not the scan of a guard, not the appraisal of a ruler, but the assessment of someone deciding whether a risk was worth understanding. "You are not supposed to remain unaffected," she said at last. Her voice was calm, resonant, shaped by authority but not sharpened by it. He considered his answer. "I don't think I was unaffected," he said. "I think I just didn't react the way you expected." A pause. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but interest. "That is worse," she replied. Something like a smile touched his mouth before he could stop it. Not amusement, recognition. "I've heard that before." The alien woman stepped inside, the door sealing behind her with a quiet finality. The room's ambient hum adjusted instantly, responding to the convergence of two presences it had not anticipated sharing space. She did not acknowledge the change. "I am told you altered the chamber," she said, moving closer. "You slowed decisions that have moved uninterrupted for centuries." "I didn't try to," he said. I just wanted to understand what was being decided. That is not the same thing. No, he agreed, it's worse. Her lips curved this time, briefly, involuntarily. The expression vanished almost as soon as it appeared, but it had been real. He had seen enough faces to know the difference. You are dangerous, she said, only if someone needs things to stay exactly the same. She stopped a few steps away from him, close enough now that he could see the fine texture of her skin, the subtle tension in her jaw. Close enough to feel the pressure in the air, not the chamber's test, but something far more personal. I am not accustomed to being observed without pretense, she said. He met her gaze evenly. I'm not very good at pretending. Silence stretched between them, thick but not hostile. The palace listened. Somewhere above, the alien girl watched from behind reinforced glass, her breath shallow, her mind racing to keep pace with what she was seeing. This was not how first contacts unfolded. There was no declaration, no power play. Just two beings standing in a room, neither willing to reduce the other to expectation. You could have asked for protection, the alien woman said. Privilege, safety. I could still ask, he replied. But then I'd have to decide what I was willing to trade for it. And you are unwilling to trade. I'm unwilling to trade blindly. Her ears shifted again, this time forward, focused. You are human, she said. Your species values survival. We value choice, he corrected gently. Survival just happens to require it. The words settled between them, unchallenged. She turned away then, moving toward the viewport. For a long moment she stood with her back to him, looking out at the stars he had been watching when she arrived. Do you know why the chamber accepted you? She asked. He shook his head. I assumed it didn't have a choice. A quiet sound escaped her, almost a laugh. The chamber always has a choice, she said. It simply prefers outcomes that cost it less in the long term. She turned back to him. And you, she continued, are less costly than resistance. That should have frightened him. It didn't. I'm not trying to be permanent, he said. That, she replied, is precisely why you might be. Another pause, longer this time. Beyond the walls, decisions were being delayed, schedules adjusted, notifications deferred. The palace was holding its breath, waiting to see which way this conversation would bend the future. The alien woman studied him for a final moment, then inclined her head, just enough to acknowledge him as something other than a variable. You will remain, she said, for now. For now is usually when things start, he replied. Her gaze lingered on him, sharp and searching. Yes, she said softly, it is. She turned and left without another word, the door sealing behind her. The human exhaled, tension finally loosening its grip on his shoulders. He sat back down slowly, aware that nothing about his situation was stable, and that stability in this palace had just been redefined. Above, the alien girl straightened, her shock giving way to something dangerously close to anticipation. Because the third variable had just entered the equation, and nothing that followed would be quiet. The door sealed with a sound so soft it barely registered. The human remained standing for a moment after she left, as if the room itself needed time to accept her absence. The pressure did not rise again. It did not test him. If anything, the air felt lighter, as though the palace had marked the encounter and decided no further correction was necessary. He sat. Only then did his hands tremble, not badly, not enough to betray panic, just enough to remind him that composure was not the same as invulnerability. He let the tremor run its course, fingers resting against his knees, breathing slow and deliberate. He had learned long ago that denying fear gave it too much power. Acknowledging it quietly kept it contained. Above him, unseen, systems logged the change. Adrenal response, DELAYD. Cognitive stability, maintained. The palace did not understand why the delay mattered, but it noted it anyway. He leaned back slightly and looked at the stars again, though they no longer held the same pull. Something closer now demanded his attention. Something that had looked at him not as a curiosity, not as a threat, but as a complication worth engaging. That was worse than hostility. That meant interest. He smiled faintly, the expression brief and private. Well, he murmured to no one, that went strangely. The palace did not respond. Somewhere above, the alien girl finally allowed herself to breathe. She had not realized how tightly she had been holding the air in her lungs until the door closed and the silence shifted. She exhaled slowly, one hand resting against the railing of the observation gallery, grounding herself as her thoughts raced ahead of her discipline. That had not been a test. That had been an evaluation. And the human had passed without knowing the criteria. Her people valued preparation, ritual, escalation. What she had just witnessed ignored all three. Two beings had entered a room with no script and left it changed. That was not how power usually moved here. She replayed every word in her mind. You are less costly than resistance. The phrase sent a chill down her spine, not because it was cruel, because it was honest. She straightened, smoothing her expression as footsteps approached behind her. She did not turn. She did not need to. Interesting, said a voice she recognized immediately. She inclined her head slightly. Yes. That was not a command, the voice continued. It was a declaration. Yes, and he did not resist it. No, she said, he reframed it. A pause, that may become inconvenient. She considered her response carefully. Inconvenience is not the same as instability. Another pause, longer. When the voice spoke again, it was quieter. Watch him. I already am. The presence withdrew, leaving the gallery to its dim quiet. The alien girl remained where she was for several seconds longer, then turned away, her path already forming in her mind. If the palace had decided to keep the human, then others would decide how to use him. She needed to decide something first. Down below, the human rose again, drawn not by fear but by restlessness. He paced once, then stopped, aware that every movement here carried weight whether he intended it to or not. He settled instead near the viewport, hands clasped loosely behind his back. He felt it then. Not pressure, attention, not the cold, procedural awareness of sensors, but something more focused, intentional. As if someone were thinking about him hard enough to bend probability around the thought. He did not turn. He did not tense. He simply said quietly, "You can come in." Silence, then footsteps. The door opened again. This time it was not the same presence. The alien girl stepped inside. She paused just beyond the threshold, clearly aware of the imbalance. She was younger than the woman who had come before, her posture less practiced, her control more effortful. Her long ears angled back reflexively, then steadied as she lifted her chin. He turned slowly to face her. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. She broke first. "You should not have said that." He blinked, said what? "That you were listening," she replied. "In the chamber." He considered this, then nodded. "Fair." She studied him closely now, eyes sharp with curiosity that had slipped past her discipline. "You altered the flow of decision-making," she said. "You changed how people spoke." "I asked questions. You asked them at the wrong time." He smiled faintly. "That's usually when questions matter." Her lips twitched despite herself. She suppressed the expression with visible effort. "You are not afraid," she said. "I am," he answered. "I'm just choosing not to let it drive." That answer unsettled her more than denial would have. She stepped further into the room, the door sealing behind her. The palace noted the proximity, the unfamiliar pairing, the lack of authorization, and did nothing. She stood a careful distance away, hands clasped before her, as though grounding herself. The palace did not announce the final shift. It never did. Shifts like this were too important to dramatize. They arrived quietly, settling into place while everyone was still arguing about something else. By the time they were noticed, they were already irreversible. The human felt it before he understood it. He stood near the viewport, watching the slow drift of light beyond the glass, while the alien girl remained a few steps behind him. She had not moved since entering the room, neither had he. The stillness between them was not awkward, it was deliberate, as if both understood that motion now would define more than posture. "You know they're watching us," she said at last. "Yes," he replied. "I was hoping you'd say that." Her ears tilted slightly, a reflex she did not bother to hide. Hoping. It's easier to stand still when you know where the weight is coming from. She considered this. You make everything sound simpler than it is. He glanced back at her, a faint smile touching his face. "That's how I keep from lying to myself." The palace responded to their proximity with subtle recalibration. Climate shifted by a fraction. Sound dampening adjusted. Sensors tightened their focus, then relaxed again as if undecided whether intervention would improve the outcome. The alien girl stepped closer, not into his space, into alignment. "You were never meant to remain here," she said quietly. "Not like this." "I never meant to," he answered. "I just didn't know how to leave without becoming something I was." That stopped her. She looked at him then, not as an observer, not as a functionary, but as someone suddenly aware of the cost of every option. He had not refused power. He had refused distortion. That, she realized, was why the palace could not reject him. Before she could speak again, the air shifted. Not pressure, presence. The door opened without ceremony, without sound. The alien woman entered, her posture composed, her expression unreadable. Authority followed her like gravity, bending attention without effort. The alien girl straightened instinctively, then stopped herself halfway through the motion. The human did not move at all. The alien woman took this in with a single glance. She did not reprimand the girl. She did not acknowledge the breach of protocol. Instead, she focused on the human with the same calm intensity she had shown before. "It is time," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For resolution." The word carried weight. It implied closure, not compromise. The palace leaned in, figuratively speaking. Systems sharpened their awareness. This moment would be recorded, referenced, analyzed. The alien woman gestured, not toward the chamber, but toward the human himself. "You have altered the pace of this place," she continued. "You have introduced friction where certainty once moved unchallenged. This cannot continue indefinitely." "I assumed not," he said. "And yet," she added, "removing you would cost more than keeping you." The alien girl's breath caught. The human absorbed the statement without visible reaction. He took a moment before responding, not because he was searching for leverage, but because he was choosing honesty. "What happens if I stay?" he asked. The alien woman did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, stopping just short of where the pressure field would have once tested him. It did not activate now. The palace had learned. "You become visible," she said, "not as a symbol, as a constant. And if I leave?" "You become a story," she replied, "and stories can be controlled." The human nodded slowly. "I don't like being either." A faint curve touched the alien woman's lips. Not amusement, respect. "You do not get to choose that," she said, "only how you inhabit it." Silence followed. The alien girl watched the human carefully, aware that this decision, whatever it was, would ripple far beyond the room. She felt an unexpected tension in her chest, sharp and personal. She did not know when that had started, only that it mattered now. The human exhaled. "I'll stay," he said, "on one condition." The palace tensed. The alien woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are not in a position to bargain." "I'm not bargaining," he replied evenly. "I'm clarifying." She inclined her head a fraction. "Speak." "I won't perform," he said. "I won't represent anything I don't understand. I won't be used to move faster than people are ready to think." The words settled heavily into the room. The alien woman studied him for a long moment, her gaze penetrating, searching for hidden ambition. She found none, only boundaries. "You ask for restraint," she said. "I offer it," he answered, Consistently. Another pause, then quietly, decisively, the alien woman nodded. Accepted. The palace released a tension it had not realized it was holding. Systems recalibrated, not in resistance but in accommodation. A new baseline formed, subtle but permanent. The alien girl felt it wash through her like a shift in gravity. The alien woman turned to her. "You will remain close," she said. "You will observe, and you will learn." The girl inclined her head, pulse racing. "Yes." The alien woman returned her attention to the human one last time. "You will stand where you stood before," she said. "Not above, not beneath." "Beside," he replied, her gaze sharpened then softened. "Yes," she said, "beside." She left without another word. The room felt different after she was gone. Not lighter, clearer. The alien girl let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. She looked at the human, then away, then back again. "You just changed how this place works," she said. He shrugged slightly. "I slowed it down." She smiled, small and genuine. "That may be the same thing." They stood together near the viewport, watching the stars continue their indifferent drift. The palace hummed around them, ancient and adaptive, already weaving this moment into its future. For the first time, the alien girl did not feel like an observer. She felt like a participant. And the human, still unremarkable in every way that mattered, stood calmly at the center